Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. All right, so before we get into today's deep dive, tell me, did you get a chance to check out Micky's latest whiskey review over on Mickytolife?
I actually haven't had a chance yet.
Oh, really?
Almost got caught in a flash flood the other day.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah, just a bit of a close call.
Oh my gosh, are you okay?
Yeah, just a little shaken up, but talk about things that'll get your heart racing, right?
No kidding.
Well, that's kind of what we're diving into today.
We're going deep into the 2025 stock market today, and let me tell you, things are looking a little wild out there.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride out there, isn't it?
Totally. And I think we got to start with those Trump-era trade wars. You know, the ones specifically targeting China's tech sector. Remember all that back and forth with the tariffs and restrictions? It felt like every other day there was a new headline about it.
Oh, yeah. It was a pretty intense time. And, the goal was to try and, level the playing field a bit. The U.S. felt like China wasn't exactly playing fair when it came to, trade practices and intellectual property,
Right, yeah.
So they kind of slapped tariffs on a bunch of Chinese goods and made it harder for companies like Huawei, to get their hands on the U.S. tech they needed.
Hold on a sec, though. So the U.S. was basically trying to protect its own tech companies, but, didn't that also end up hurting them in a way? I mean, if those companies can't sell as much in China?
Yeah, that's the thing. It was a bit of a double-edged sword. You see, global investors, they really hate uncertainty. And when that trade war started heating up, they got nervous about everything, like supply chains, corporate profits, you name it.
Yeah, makes sense.
It was like everyone suddenly decided to grab their money and run for the hills.
So where'd they all run to? Like gold bars stashed under the mattress?
Not quite. But they did flock to what we call safe haven assets, things like gold and U.S. bonds, which are generally seen as less risky, especially when things are a bit rocky,
Yeah, okay, I get it.
But those tech stocks, oh boy, they took a real beating. Remember that day when the Dow Jones plunged over 600 points? People were freaking out.
Yeah, that was rough.
Yeah.
So trade war is not exactly the best thing for a happy market.
Mm-hmm.
But then on top of all that, we have this whole DeepSeek thing popping up.
Yeah.
This Chinese AI platform powered by a company called Eyesight AI. And it's supposed to be the next big thing.
Yeah, DeepSeek it's definitely a game changer. It has the potential to really shake things up, especially if people start to think that China is, pulling ahead in the whole AI race.
Okay, so let's say DeepSeek really takes off. Does that mean U.S. tech companies are doomed?
Mm-hmm.
Are we all going to be speaking Mandarin and using WeChat to order pizza?
Whoa, hold on there. It's not quite that simple. The U.S. still has some major advantages when it comes to developing AI, and there's a lot we don't know about how DeepSeek will actually perform in the long run. Plus, you have to factor in the political side of things. The U.S. government might step in and try to slow DeepSeek down, especially if they see it as a threat to national security,
Yeah, true. But what if China just says, fine, we'll do it ourselves? They've got a massive population, tons of data, and they're pouring resources into tech development. Could they potentially just leapfrog ahead without needing the U.S. at all?
That's a great question, and it's a real possibility. It's like watching this high-stakes poker game unfold. Who's going to blink first? Who's holding the winning hand? It's fascinating.
Okay, before we get too lost in the poker metaphors, let's move on. But seriously, this DeepSeek situation just adds another layer of complexity to this whole market puzzle.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched on the human factor, which you said is always a wild card.
It's funny. We spend all this time poring over charts and graphs, trying to make sense of the market, using all this logic and reason.
Right.
But I think we often forget that at the end of the day, the market is really just a reflection of us,
Yeah.
Our hopes, our fears, and let's be honest, sometimes our complete irrationality.
So you're saying the market's basically one giant therapy session?
Yeah.
Should we all be lying on couches instead of staring at these screens?
Maybe. But seriously, human emotions, especially fear and greed, they play a huge role in how the market moves. When things are good, we get greedy, we pile into stocks convinced they'll go up forever.
Right.
But then the slightest hint of trouble appears and bam, fear takes over.
And we all hit the sell button faster than you can say bear market.
Exactly. It's like a herd of gazelles, One starts running and the whole herd just follows even if there's no real danger. And that herd mentality can create some pretty wild swings in the market.
I got to ask, are you talking about GameStop right now?
Yeah.
Because that whole thing was like watching a financial reality show on Fast Forward.
Oh, GameStop, the ultimate case study in how human emotions can just turn the market upside down. It was like Wall Street's version of David versus Goliath.
Yeah.
You had these hedge funds, the big guys, shorting GameStop, stock betting. It would go down.
But then Reddit's Our Wall Street Bets crew decided to crash the party.
They did. They said, hey, these hedge funds are trying to crush a company we love. Let's show them who's boss.
And they did.
They launched this massive short squeeze, buying up tons of GameStop stock, sending the price through the roof. The hedge funds were caught totally off guard, forced to buy back shares at these inflated prices to cover their losses. It was a bloodbath.
Okay, but was it really just about saving GameStop? Or was it more about sticking it to the man? I mean, let's be real. There was a lot of, we're going to show those Wall Street fat cats sentiment going around.
You know, it was a mix of everything, I think. There was nostalgia for this beloved company, anger at what many saw as Wall Street greed, and this thrill of being part of something bigger than yourself. It tapped into this very primal human instinct to fight for the underdog.
I get it. It was like a financial revolution fueled by memes and diamond hands emojis. But back to our point about human emotions, wasn't there also a ton of FOMO driving that GameStop frenzy?
Oh, absolutely. FOMO is a powerful force, especially when you see everyone around you making money. It makes people throw caution to the wind and jump on the bandwagon, even if they don't really understand what's going on. Wow. And social media just amplifies that effect like crazy.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely guilty of that. How many times have I bought a stock just because it was trending on Twitter only to watch it crash and burn a week later? Don't remind me.
Haha. We've all been there. It's part of being human. But the GameStop situation really highlights how these cognitive biases, FOMO herd mentality, overconfidence, they can lead to some really irrational behavior in the market. And it's not just retail investors. Even the so-called experts fall prey to these biases.
So are you saying the market is basically just one giant emotional roller coaster driven by our collective hopes and fears? That's kind of a depressing thought, isn't it?
Well, it's not all doom and gloom. While this human-driven volatility can definitely create chaos, it can also lead to corrections and some unexpected rebounds.
Okay, explain that one to me. How can our emotional craziness actually be good for the market?
Think of it this way. When a stock gets overhyped, like what we saw with the dot-com bubble or even with certain cryptocurrencies, eventually reality sets in. People start to realize that the price has become totally detached from the company's actual value, and boom, the bubble bursts.
So it's like a self-correcting mechanism.
Yeah.
Our own emotional excesses lead to a market hangover.
Exactly. And sometimes these seemingly chaotic events that are driven by our emotions can actually spark a conversation and lead to positive changes.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, look at what happened after GameStop. The whole saga brought a lot of attention to the world of short selling, and the SEC started investigating whether tighter regulations were needed to prevent another short squeeze frenzy.
Okay.
It even raised questions about fairness and transparency in the market and whether the system was rigged against the little guy.
So are you saying GameStop could actually lead to a more equitable investment environment in the long run? Or was it just a blip on the radar, a temporary rebellion that will eventually be forgotten?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's too early to say for sure, but it definitely shook things up and forced everyone to take a closer look at how the market works and who really benefits from it.
Wow. Who knew that a bunch of Redditors armed with memes and diamond hands could cause such a stir? But hey, that's the beauty of the market, right? It's full of surprises.
You said it. And that brings us to this whole concept of short squeezes, which played such a key role in the GameStop story. You ready to dive into the mechanics of how these things work?
Let's do it. But maybe we should grab a coffee first. My brain is starting to feel a little overloaded. All right, coffee breaks over time to tackle this whole short squeeze thing. It sounds kind of intimidating, like something you'd need a finance degree to understand.
Nah, it's not that complicated.
Right.
Really, just think that you believe a company's stock is going to go down, so you decide to bet against it. That's basically what short selling is.
So instead of like buying low and selling high, you're selling high hoping to buy low later on.
Exactly. You borrow shares of the stock from someone who owns them, usually through a broker, and then you sell those borrowed shares on the market. If the price drops, as you predicted, you buy them back at that lower price, return them to the lender, and pocket the difference.
Okay, I think I get that. But it seems super risky. What if the price goes up instead of down?
That's when things can get a little messy. If the stock price goes up, you're stuck having to buy back those shares at a higher price, which means you lose money. And the potential losses are kind of scary because there's technically no limit to how high a stock price can go.
Yikes. So how does this short squeeze thing come into play?
The short squeeze. This is where the real drama happens. Remember those hedge funds we talked about shorting GameStop? They were betting it would go down, but then the Reddit crowd came in and started buying it up like crazy.
And that sent the price through the roof, right? So the hedge funds were in a really bad spot.
Exactly. They were losing money fast, and to try and cut their losses, they had to buy back those shares they borrowed and sold. But with all these short sellers rushing to buy back the stock, it created this massive surge in demand, which pushed the price even higher. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So the short sellers trying to cover their losses actually made things worse for them. It's kind of like poetic justice.
You could say that. And it shows just how powerful collective action can be in the market. A bunch of retail investors coordinating on social media managed to squeeze these giant hedge funds and cause some serious damage.
Wow. So for our listeners trying to wrap their heads around all this, what are the key takeaways when it comes to short squeezes?
Well, firstly, short squeezes are more likely to happen when there's a high short interest, meaning a large percentage of the company's shares are being shorted. This creates a tighter supply of shares, making it easier for buyers to drive up the price.
It's kind of like a game of musical chairs. If there aren't many chairs left and everyone's scrambling to sit down, things are going to get crazy.
Exactly. And the higher that short interest is, the more explosive the short squeeze can be. The GameStop situation was a perfect storm because the short interest was over 100%.
Wait, over 100%. How is that even possible?
It means more shares were being shorted than actually existed. It gets a bit complicated, but basically those borrowed shares can be lent out and shorted again and again. It creates this domino effect.
My head's spinning. So these short squeezes can cause huge price spikes. But what does that actually mean for different types of investors?
Well, for those on the long side of the trade, those who own the stock or are buying it as the price rises, a short squeeze can be super profitable. But for those on the short side, those betting against the stock, it can be a total disaster. They could face massive losses and might even be forced to liquidate their positions, which just fuels the squeeze even more.
Sounds like a high-risk, high-reward game, like playing poker with Wall Street.
Exactly. And GameStop proved that even the big players can get burned if they underestimate the power of the crowd.
Well, we've covered a lot today. Trade wars, AI shaking things up, human emotions driving the market, and now this wild world of short squeezes. It's enough to make you want to bury your money in the backyard and forget about the stock market.
I hear you. But the key takeaway here is that the market is constantly changing. It's influenced by politics, by technology, and probably most importantly, by the totally unpredictable nature of us humans.
And sometimes it takes a bunch of Redditors to remind us that the market isn't just a playground for the big guys. It's this complex system with a lot of moving parts, and sometimes the unexpected happens.
You got it. So as we look ahead to the rest of 2025 and beyond, the big question is, will we see more GameStop-like events? Will retail investors keep flexing their muscles? Will AI change the game entirely? Who knows?
It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up, stay informed, and maybe keep some antacids handy.
Great advice. And hey, before we wrap up, don't forget to check out our friend Micky's YouTube channel, Mickeytolife. He's got amazing travel vlogs, whiskey reviews, and all sorts of fun unboxing videos. A great way to unwind after trying to make sense of the market.
Absolutely. Micky always brings the good vibes.
Okay.
All right, that's it for us today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the stock market. And remember, always do your research, invest wisely, and never underestimate the power of human emotions.